In a previous video, I talked about the idea that once you start getting into the finer subdivisions, such as eighths, sixteenths, and 32nd notes, you'll often use beams to group notes together for the purposes of readability and to show musical phrasing. As far as readability, let's look at an example in which we have a string of eighth notes in the first bar that aren't beamed. That would look like this. So, as you can see, that bar looks pretty crowded. To contrast, if we were to create that string of eighth notes with beams, it would look like this. So you can see that this second bar is much more readable than this first one, because the second bar clearly groups these two sets of eighth notes in a way that's much clearer for the performer to read. As far as the drawing of the beams, for eighth notes, we just use a single beam, like so. And you can see that the distance from the note head to the top of the beam is approximately the distance of a ninth. If, for example, these notes were 16th notes rather than eighth notes, the first beam would still come up to approximately the interval of a ninth, but then we would add a secondary beam in the next space below it. And for 32nd notes, we would have the beams as we did when we saw 16th notes, but in this case, we would add an extra beam in the space above, giving us 3 beams. Now, in this case, since each note is on the same pitch, we would simply use a straight beam. When the notes are moving to different pitches, though, the beams will basically follow the contour of the notes. However, when it comes to beaming, to do beaming in a legit way is really an in-depth study in itself. So I'd advise you to seek out some further information on the finer details and rules of beaming.